Every June, the French countryside becomes the most punishing testing ground on Earth. The 24 hours of Le Mans demands drivers and machines run flat out for a full day and night. By the early 1960s, this endurance test belonged almost exclusively to one manufacturer. Ferrari routinely left the rest of the field struggling to keep up. Their cars possessed an engineered precision that made winning look routine, stringing together a long chain of consecutive victories. Behind those machines was Enzo Ferrari. To him, selling passenger cars was simply a way to fund his true obsession. Racing was the absolute core of his company's existence. Arriving at Le Mans to challenge him meant going against an automotive deity on his turf. Across the Atlantic, Henry Ford II had a different problem. His company sold millions of cars, but lacked the global prestige that European motorsport provided. Ford operated on a staggering industrial scale, producing vehicles by the millions on assembly lines. Ferrari was struggling financially, building highly specialized cars in small batches. To Ford, acquiring the Italian marque looked like a straightforward corporate buyout. For months, the two sides negotiated. The lawyers drafted the paperwork, and a multi-million-dollar acquisition was nearly complete. Then, Enzo read the fine print. He discovered he would lose absolute control of his racing division to the executives in Detroit. He immediately killed the deal, personally delivering a blessing in rejection that left the American executives completely and utterly stunned. Henry Ford II saw the rejection as a personal insult. He abandoned the merger and turned his attention to Le Mans, vowing to dismantle Ferrari's reputation on the track. For the head of Ford, this had moved beyond a business deal. It was now a personal vendetta. The campaign that followed would involve the most expensive engineering project in the history of the sport. Detroit immediately opened its checkbook. Ford recruited a global syndicate of engineers, aerodynamicists, and mechanics, giving them a single objective: build a vehicle capable of defeating Ferrari. To lead the campaign, they brought in Carroll Shelby. He possessed a rare combination of raw engineering insight and direct, high-level racing experience that Ford's corporate structure lacked. Building a car to sprint around a track is one thing. Le Mans requires a machine to withstand 24 hours of constant, agonizing friction, heat, and structural stress without disintegrating. The culmination of this massive financial and intellectual investment was the Ford GT40. It bypassed the consumer market entirely. The GT40 was an industrial weapon, engineered purely for revenge. But raw speed and a massive budget couldn't bypass the brutal reality of endurance racing. In its early outings, the GT40 proved completely unreliable. Under the extreme pressures of the track, gearboxes shattered. Engines overheated and failed long before reaching the finish line. Meanwhile, Ferrari's finely tuned machines continued to cross the finish line flawlessly, extending their grip on the podium. Ford had poured millions into the program, only to suffer public defeats that compounded the initial sting of Enzo's rejection. Rather than fold, Shelby's team doubled down. They returned to the garage and systematically reinforced the GT40. They overhauled the aerodynamics, vastly improved the cooling systems, and installed a more durable engine designed to endure the 24-hour marathon. Those brutal early losses stripped away the flaws. By the time they finished, the GT40 had evolved into a hardened, highly resilient apex predator. In June of 1966, Ford returned to the French countryside. This time, they arrived with an armada of heavily refined GT40s, ready for a decisive strike. As the flag dropped and drivers sprinted to their cars, Ferrari expected another routine defense. But Ford's preparation immediately manifested on the asphalt. The American team set a relentless, punishing pace. They actively weaponized their speed, forcing the Ferraris to push past their mechanical limits in a desperate attempt to keep up. The pressure tactic worked. One by one, the Italian machines began to fracture under the strain, turning the hunters into the hunted. When the 24 hours finally expired, Ford had executed an absolute slaughter. This finishing order illustrates the totality of the result. GT40s occupied every slot on the podium, leaving no room for Ferrari in the top 3 positions. The sweep dismantled the belief that European artistry was invincible. It proved that deep industrial backing and American engineering could entirely overwhelm established motorsport dynasties. The GT40 stands as a permanent reminder of a brutal truth in motorsport. The greatest leaps forward in engineering rarely come from a gentle desire to innovate. They happen when a massive company decides to go to war and refuses to lose.